Hey guys, and welcome back to the internet. So we got a few really long stories today, followed by a pretty fun question. So this first one was user submitted, called "We Accidentally Blew Up Our Brother." So some context, I grew up unsupervised. I have a lot of siblings, and my parents separated when I was 12, so my mom worked 3 jobs. We never saw our dad much. That said, babysitting all the younger kids fell to my 2 closest brothers and I. We were all just a year apart, more or less. So at the time, my older brother was 13, my younger brother was 11, and I was 12. So my brothers and I were always bored and trying to come up with something entertaining to do, while all the younger kids were either busy watching TV or movies, taking naps, or in school while we skipped. That day was one of the latter situations. The 3 of us had ditched school for the day, seeing it was really close to summer, after making sure the little kids got to their classes just fine, and hanging out in our backyard. In the yard, we had an old lean-to shed. It was small and mostly made of metal, and some of the sharp paneling was coming apart. Inside, swarmed with all kinds of insects. Where it had been once used for a playhouse for the kids, it had more or less turned into one giant nest of bugs. Wasps had made a home on top of the shed, ants had made plenty of hills to call their own, almost entirely out of the crumbs my sister had probably left behind, and spider webs in every single corner, and not the cute kinds either, like daddy longlegs or the plain old house spiders. I'd seen black widows and an odd brown recluse here or there, so poisonous spiders. Anyway, that particular day, the boys and I got to talking about how dangerous the shed had become. We started toying with ideas on how to get rid of it. To keep the little kids safe, of course. However, our ideas got less and less practical and more, well, bad. But we were middle school kids, and we thought we ruled, because we were part of the neighborhood gang. I mean, it wasn't a real gang. And we'd also been saddled with tons of responsibility at home. Sometimes it made us feel a lot older than we were, but if something happened to one of the kids, our mom would have rained hell down on top of us. And we knew that from experience. We'd have each got a nasty lashing for our carelessness. So what did we ultimately decide to do? Yep, blow it up, because somehow in our heads, it would be the quickest way to solve the problem. Oh, also, we liked fire. So we got to work straight away, searching the garage for anything even remotely flammable, and filled the lean-to with WD-40, old half-empty gas canisters, 3/4 full of bottles of hairspray from my mom's bathroom, and literally anything else we could come up with. When we'd felt the place was sufficiently flammable, I sat in the open window to my room, facing the backyard. None of the windows in our house had screens on them, while the boys stood in the middle of the yard, a safe distance from the shed. I said, "So, how are we gonna light it on fire?" My older brother said, "We could throw a match inside." I say, "That only works in movies, stupid. Someone has to go inside and light it." My little brother, grinning like a madman, says, "I'll do it." I say, "Wait, but..." He took the matches from my other brother's outstretched hand and confidently headed to the doorway of the shed. I saw him struggle to light the first match, and when it didn't work, he dropped it on the ground and took a step further into the lean-to, so I couldn't see him anymore. I heard the match light, and then I saw a giant ball of fire erupt from inside the shed, followed by a giant plume of smoke billowing into the cloudy sky. With a startled shriek, I stared wide-eyed at my brother, the oldest of the 3 of us. We caught each other's eyes, and I knew instantly he was thinking the same thing I was. We'd just killed our younger brother. I wasn't sure if I should start sobbing or freaking out about the beating I would surely get when Mom got home. However, before I could even try to think of a game plan, my older brother and I heard screaming, and Jay ran out of the burning shed with his hair on fire and his clothes smoldering. He started running all over the yard, shrieking like a banshee, while smoke trailed after him. As terrible as it sounds, Z and I's only reaction was to laugh. Hard, in fact. I was laughing so much I fell out the window and cut my arm on the way down, but I didn't even notice until much later. After finally pulling ourselves together, Z and I managed to grab the hose and spray down our brother, while still cackling like hyenas. Especially when we realized his hair had gone from dark brown to being singed blonde. So me, after we'd looked over him and decided his injuries were superficial at best, say, "Go take a shower and scrub off the smell. We'll get rid of this mess and Mom will never know." He looks at me like I'm insane. How could she not know? "Just trust us, we'll take care of everything." And we did. Z and I grabbed crowbars and screwdrivers and any other tool we could find, and once the smoldering remains had cooled down enough, we dismantled the entire shed in a couple hours. Our mom never even realized anything was gone. I think at one point one of the little kids had asked her what happened, and when she inquired about it, all we told her was that it had been removed due to dangerous insect activity. I was never sure if she thought we were lying or not, but she never investigated any further. The poor woman almost never did, at least when it came to anything I told her. She was just too tired. So Jay had to wear a hat for a year, because of his singed blonde hair. But our mom never once questioned his reasoning for that. It was actually just until a few years ago, probably a good 25 years afterwards, that we finally told her the real story. She was not amused and threatened to ground us, even though we're all in our 20s now. We just laughed. I mean, is it just me, or have the times changed so much that something like this probably didn't seem too out of the ordinary 25 years ago, but today it would seem just outrageous? Well, it sounded like you guys had fun, and at least nobody got seriously hurt. Alright, next we've got, entitled mom thinks I should do her dishes when I don't even live there. So recently, I moved out of my mom's place and went to go live with my grandmother. Nothing bad happened, I just got a job closer to where she lived, and she offered me a place to live, which I accepted. Now, before my move, when I lived with my mom, I would do almost everything for her, and I thought all of it was in reason because she did provide for the household. I would do chores, watch the kids, cook dinner, do everyone's laundry. I did it all because she was busy with work, and when she'd come home, she'd be too tired to actually do anything. It wasn't until I realized that I was 19 without a job or a license. My mom wouldn't allow me to get one, so I just moved. I have 2 other siblings that I care for, the oldest being 15. I moved in with my grandma and settled down for about a month. My mom had no hard feelings because I wasn't too far and I wasn't living with a stranger. And after I moved, she couldn't really say anything about me getting a job. I finally had a load off as I didn't have to do so many chores with only 2 people in the house, so all was well. Until my mom was hosting a family Sunday dinner, a tradition that we honor a few times a month. Me and my grandma, of course, plan to go because food. We arrive and the house is in disarray. Toys are everywhere, the laundry room a mess, and worst of all, the dishes. All the dishes had been used. They were overflowed in the sink, all over counters, some left on the floor, some between cushions. It was absolutely ridiculous. We ate dinner in a separate, more clean room. When we finish, we start watching movies together. As the movie reaches its end, my mom asks whose turn it is to do the kitchen. I think nothing of it because she couldn't have been talking to me. I thought maybe her and my younger brother were taking turns splitting between each other for chores. I mean, it wasn't unusual considering I've been doing the dishes ever since I was old enough to reach the counter. Then my brother speaks up, says, "But I did it on so-and-so date." My mom asks me, "And when did you do it?" My brother tells her, "Before I left, which was weeks ago." I started questioning in my head why I'm suddenly a part of this conversation. Then my mom looks back at the TV and starts to pick something out for herself. And when she starts to play some TV shows, she tells me that I need to do the dishes because it's your night. I look at her confused. She can't be serious. She expects me to do a month's worth of dishes? She expects me to clean the dishes I haven't even used? I straight up told her that there was no way I would ever be doing any of her dishes. She tried to pull the whole, "I'm a parent and you're the child" bullcrap. I had to remind her that I wasn't a child and I don't even live with her. She ended up getting upset and just started to yell at me how I couldn't do anything and how it was my own fault for not doing the dishes, and that's why there was so much. After a while, I just left and waited until my grandma was done. It's been about a week and I haven't heard anything from my mom. Man, that would suck. You do all the chores at home, and then you move out, and they still expect you to come back to do all of the chores. I have my own chores I gotta do now, thank you very much. Okay, next we've got, you want me to take breaks on time? Sure. So this is a malicious compliance mixed with a little bit of, today I effed up. So, quick explanation. I work for a huge company in customer service department. My job is mainly emails, so a customer will call, speak to a colleague who will create an issue form, and send it to a correct warehouse. I sometimes have to take calls, when it's urgent or serious. Because of this, I can't always take my assigned breaks bang on time. Last week, my manager left for a new job, which sucks because he was awesome. And the guy covering for him, let's say if someone dropped a car on his head, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Anyway, right off the bat, on the very first day, the new manager starts barking orders. I already knew him, as a very good friend colleague worked under him for months. I had previously spent 30 minutes talking to said colleague because this manager made her cry and hate the job. I used to carry out some extra jobs for the previous manager, but something had happened, and I no longer wanted to do it. I informed my manager, who understood. There were 2 of us doing this job, and let's call this colleague C. So the manager basically questions people like it's an interrogation. I've gone as far as to say to people in passing, if I fart, I swear he'll expect me to tell him how it smells. The manager told me off on the second day for not taking my breaks at the correct time. I tried to explain that it isn't always possible. If I get an issue form 5 minutes before my break and it takes 20 minutes to fix, I'll just go for my break after and still have the same amount of time. He says, "That is not acceptable. You are expected to be available to take any issue outside of your allocated break times." I say, "I understand, but again, enough. I've told you already. Let this be the last I hear of this." Okay. So the following day, the manager approaches my colleague and told her she's expected to carry out the old extra tasks, and I am too. So they say, "Has the manager told you about this extra task?" I say, "No, what's up?" "Well, he wants us both to do all of this." I say, "Yeah, I'm not doing it. I told the previous manager I was dropping it." They say, "Okay." So 5 minutes later, the manager messages me. "So your colleague tells me you don't want to do the extra task. Why?" I say, "I have my reasons for not wanting to take on the responsibility." Then please explain them to me, as I am making a reasonable management request for you to support your team. I say, sure, I don't want to because it's not part of my role. I'm not obligated, I'm underappreciated, and I get nothing extra from it. And a few other private reasons I don't want to discuss. He says, wow, well thank you for the support. You are required to follow any reasonable management request given to you. I will pick this up formally with you. You will not be required to do anything that is not, as you put it, part of your job role from now on. Thank you. I say, you never formally asked me to. You told my colleague to tell me. So yesterday, I get a call come through, which means it is important. Huge issue. I look at the time, and it's 2:20 p.m., and my break is at 2:30, but I take the call. The customer complains and explains the issue. I try to help, but 2:29 approaches. So I say, sorry, I have to take my mandatory break now. I will speak to you in 30 minutes. And I hang up the phone. Evidently, the customer called back, spoke to someone else, and put a complaint in place, which ended on my manager's hands. He calls me today, asking, why are you so rude and unprofessional to the customer? That attitude is unacceptable, and I will be taking this to HR. I say, and tell them what exactly? You had threatened me to take my breaks at the correct second, and when I tried to explain the situation, you completely cut me off. I was following your demands, however unreasonable. You weren't willing to listen, so I acted according to your orders. Regardless, I didn't mean it you had to take it at the correct second. A few minutes earlier would be acceptable. I say, that's not what you said before, and I no longer wish to continue this argument. If you want to get HR involved, I'm happy to proceed. So now I'm waiting to hear from HR to see what the next step is going to be. I have the evidence compiled that he ordered me to take my break at the specific time, but who knows what will happen. Yeah, that's one of those situations where it's like, well, you're in trouble whether you follow the orders or not. So you might as well push the blame onto the person who forced you into it. Alright, and one more big story before the question of the day, which is the bad grocery place. So I've written before about the good grocery store where I worked in high school. We had a couple of bad customers and a lot of senile seniors, but it was well run with a great manager. The one I worked at for one summer in college was the bad place. It was 1994 and a chain grocery store with a truly awful manager who was straight out of business school. He was also the regional office director's son, so he was Teflon. Anything that went wrong got pinned on the assistant manager and or hushed up at the regional level. Awful had managed to install his mistress as one of the assistant managers. I only saw her in the store twice, and both times she was shopping. One of the times she didn't even pay, so Awful paid no attention to people's time constraints. We had a bunch of teenagers there who were attending summer school. He didn't care. He scheduled however he wanted and left us to swap shifts among ourselves. I personally saw him tell one girl she'd have to miss school because he needed her on shift, and she couldn't find coverage. Crazy illegal. He didn't care about legalities. His belief was that if the computer would accept it, then it was fine. It was the early day of computerized payroll, so the system would take literally anything with no checks. He made the teenagers work hours they legally couldn't. I'm talking too late or too early and lots of overtime. If they complained, he threatened to fire them. That was his answer to everything, and work wasn't easy to come by in that area. There were teenagers in tears because he wouldn't let them take time for family vacations, or they were being forced to miss tests at school. One guy was fired because he went to his sister's wedding. He'd warned Awful about it months in advance, and it was a holiday weekend, so nobody could swap. Awful was very rarely, if ever, in the store his entire shift. He'd clock in, get the few really important things done, then leave. He'd come back in the middle of his shift to do the bank deposits, then be gone again until it was time to clock out. He assigned all his work to the latest fall guy assistant manager or other random employees. If he was the only manager on duty, he'd leave his badge for overrides on the desk in the office so we could grab it when we needed to override register errors. All of this was massively against company policy. I mentioned in a previous post how National was pretty obsessed with mystery shopper reports and got them directly from the company that did that stuff. We'd get all kinds of conflicting instructions because National's edicts based on those and our regional director's policies would differ. Always fun. What I didn't mention was mystery shoppers were trivial to spot. They'd go straight to the bakery to price out a special order cake, and then not buy it, complain about the price, or ask any of the normal questions. They also went to the bathroom, the fish counter, asked for a price check, and made us unring something they decided they didn't want during checkout. There were other things on the list, but those are the obvious ones I remember all these years later. My last week at this crap show before I headed back to college, I spotted a blatant mystery shopper complete with a notepad. Awful had bugged out shortly after open. The mistress was probably busy banging him. The other assistant manager had been fired for the last colossal screw-up, and the only other cashier on shift was at lunch. It was pretty dead as it was late morning, so no big deal. Except that I decided it was time for this crap show to get reported for what it was. When Mystery came up with her price check item, I forgot to hit the price check button and rang it up for real. Whoops, time to get the manager's override badge. I overrode it, then I tossed that bad boy so hard it went all the way across the manager's desk, and down into the C cables behind his computer. Whoops. I'm quite sure that if you went to the tapes, this looked incredibly intentional. It was my last week, you could count the Fs I gave on no hands. Somewhere around this time, the other cashier, we'll call her Jenny, got back from her lunch break, and I informed her that the crap was about to get real. She might want to go home sick if she wanted some cover. Nah, Jenny giggled and wanted a front row seat. Besides, the lunch rush was coming. We had a construction area nearby, and a lot of the guys came for the prepared foods for a cheap hot lunch. We started to get the lunch rush and more of a crowd by the time Mystery made it up to the register to check out. Of course, she needed me to unring something for her checklist, so I flipped on the "Help me, Obi-Wan" light. Nothing happened. I called for Awful over the intercom by manager first name, last name. Jenny caught on real fast and told me to just go get the badge from the office. Awful, first name, last name, must be doing the money drop or something. I pointed out to Jenny that it was against company policy. She rolled her eyes and told me that's what Awful had said to do. Now, where was that override badge? I headed up to the office and made a good show of looking for it. Called down to Jenny, asking if she had it. Nope. Jenny abandoned the big order she was ringing up, and came up to the little office to give a cursory look around. This is where the whole story took a turn I hadn't gamed out. See, I was just going to give Mystery a very bad visit with many violations to report. There'd have been an embarrassing reaming from National and possibly even an investigation. Jenny had other plans. Jenny was going nuclear. So Jenny apologized to the mystery shopper, but she was going to have to get in Jenny's line now. I couldn't void the transaction or log into 2 registers at once, so I was going to help her pack it up, and Jenny would get to Mystery as soon as she could. Now, this was somewhat BS. While true as stated, we all knew how to unplug the registers to get them to reset and log us out. It was a dumb hack, but it worked. Thing was, there was also zero chance Awful or Mystery knew that. So Mystery must have loved her mystery shopping gig, because she was the most cheerful, screwed-over customer you ever did see. She smiled, assured us everything was fine, and scribbled in her notebook the whole time. Literally while I'm loading up Mystery's card at my register, Jenny accidentally rang up a gallon of milk about 6 times. Whoops. No override card, no manager, no head cashier with any power either. We apologized profusely to the customers, but explained that we had no idea where Awful was. Offered to check in the back, sent a bagger out to check the lot in case Awful was out on a smoke break. No joy. As the fiasco rolled on, we had a lot of very unhappy customers on our hands, and the downright giddy Mystery who stayed to the bitter end. We were demanded to call the manager. We tried all of Awful's known numbers. Who's above him? Oh, that's regional, and we're not allowed to call them. Very strict instructions from the manager. Which is true, and very against company policy. But we can give you their number. The phone's right over there. Many took advantage. We also got yelled at a lot, but in spite of some sympathy for the customers, we were loving every second of it. Regional took about 2 hours to get somebody down to the store who could clear the registers. Nobody else in the store had permissions on that system. Awful still hadn't shown up. Regional dude eroded the registers, but by then the damage was done. We'd missed the whole lunch rush. No hot food was sold. Our metrics for the day were going to be unbelievably crappy. Regional dude was on the phone frantically trying to figure out how to cover this mess up for his boss, which was his father, and decided to blame it on a computer outage. I think they intentionally broke some equipment to help sell that story. Awful rolled in after I clocked out, but I'm told Regional dude was still there doing Awful's job. So Awful was unbearable for the next couple days, but I had a foot out the door. Jenny, it turned out, simply didn't care because she'd been doing the work of a head cashier without the pay. It took a few weeks for the fallout to happen, and you bet I kept in touch with Jenny to find out. From this point, I only know what Jenny told me, as I was back in college a few states away. A few weeks later, an audit team from National came down to investigate. The mystery shopper story hadn't lined up with the computer outage story, and something was obviously hinky. They dug into the books and found all labor violations for minors working overtime and too early and late, interviewed the employees and found out about the scheduling during school time problems, manager absenteeism, no vacation being allowed, also the store was constantly short-staffed. Yeah, no crap. People ran for the hills as soon as they got anything else. Finally, that an assistant manager was on payroll full-time, but nobody had ever seen her work. She clocked in and out within seconds of the assistant manager every shift he worked, but was never there. Them dots ain't hard to connect. I don't know if they covered up all the labor violations or not. Probably, that would have caused massive fines. I was too young to know how to report them. However, Awful, his father, and his mistress all got fired or registered quietly. The store reportedly went back to being pretty functional after that, and Jenny got a better job and left within a year. I never worked retail again. Wow, that is quite the takedown story. I mean, if you have a manager that is that bad, how hard is it to just, call up the corporate offices and get him fired? That sounds like a nightmare. Alright, if you lasted through that whole story, the question of the day is, what's the dumbest thing you've ever done because your brain was on autopilot? And since a lot of these responses were very short, we've got a lot of them. So a couple times a year I'll say, love you, to a business colleague when ending a phone call. My wife gets a kick out of that. Well, at least she doesn't get upset over it. I started a new job, got to my old workplace before I realized what I'd done. I've never worked anywhere long enough to make that mistake. So when I was a truck driver, I drove 200 miles down the wrong freeway and had to turn around and drive 200 miles back. I never told my dispatcher, and he never caught it. Truck drivers probably zone out more than most occupations. So I locked my vehicle and tossed the keys inside before shutting the door. Oh man, I've never done this, but I've been paranoid about doing it like hundreds of times. So once I was sick and not thinking too well, a package delivery person rang the doorbell. So me, not thinking, got up from the couch, walked up to the door, and knocked on it. Then I opened the door to a mildly confused delivery man and took the package. It wasn't until I had closed the door, box in hand, that I realized my error. I guess you were just wanting the delivery man to open the door then? I printed out an essay and then threw it right into the trash. Well, that tends to happen when you're so used to accidental prints. I shaved off an eyebrow. I was shaving my chin and my eyebrow got itchy, so I scratched it with the razor. That's a mistake that'll haunt you for the next few weeks at least. So I drove to work one morning, I promptly forgot, and then I took the bus home, leaving my car in the parking lot. Oh man, I heard a story just like this from a streamer guy a long time ago, known as Day 9. Apparently, he was really tired, and he drove to the grocery store, and then just walked home. And then he woke up and thought his car got stolen, so he called the police, and then realized that he'd made the mistake much later when they found his car abandoned in a grocery store parking lot. So I used nail polish remover instead of mouthwash after brushing my teeth. It was awful. Probably equally as acidic. So I started clapping for myself after my speech in front of an audience because the audience started clapping. Just following the crowd. So I came home with a friend, started undressing as soon as I closed the door. Don't mind me, I'm just gonna change into something more comfortable. I dumped my soda into my food at a restaurant. What? What did you think you were doing, putting sauce on it or something? I poured milk into my cereal box once. Okay, that one's almost as bad. My nephew has one of those big iPads and takes notes with a stylus. If you tap the stylus, it undoes the last writing. Now when he makes a mistake in pencil, he taps the pencil. Oh man, I have the same issue. Whenever I'm drawing something and I make a mistake, I'm like, Control Z. Oh no, this isn't on a computer. I normally only see my neighbor when I arrive home from walking my dogs, so I'm holding the dogs on leashes as I greet the old guy next door most of the time, and have to tell the dogs to come along. One day I dropped the dogs off inside my place and headed out to bring the bins in after collection. I see the neighbor and exchange greetings as per usual. As we finish, I turn to the bin and say, "Come on, let's go." Well, did it come with you? Just recently I was talking to a friend and got on topic about something that I had been looking up on my phone. I started to search for my phone so I could send him the link. I couldn't find it anywhere. I was talking to him while walking from room to room looking everywhere, checking my pants pockets, looking in weird random places I've left it before. Eventually I told him I'd send it to him when I found my phone. He reminded me that I was talking to him on my phone. Yeah, I think we've all done something like that. I tried opening my front door with my car key unlock button. Now I'm kinda interested. I want to get a door like that. I used my phone flashlight to find my phone. Well, I hope you found it at least. Not me, but my husband called me from work because he forgot to put a shirt on before leaving. And could I bring him one, please? There he was, just wearing a jacket. Evidently, he tossed it on to go start the car in the cold and never took it off. So, a runner-up goes to the time my daughter went to school and forgot to put on underwear in 2nd grade. Yeah, of course she was wearing a skirt. We lived 30 minutes from school, and she realized it just as we pulled into the parking lot, and I marched her into the nurse, who grabbed out an emergency stash of granny briefs labeled with the school's name on them in big black Sharpie. She's 18 now and still mortified when we bring it up. Wow, I didn't know nurses had solutions to those kinds of problems. So I scanned a customer's groceries, removed the dividing bar from my register, and began scanning the next customer's groceries. But I once spent too long trying to find the barcode on the dividing bar while scanning. The customer let me figure it out on my own. Yeah, I've worked retail, and it really just feels like an insult to your brain. So you just say, "Don't worry, brain, you don't have to work today. I can figure things out without you." So I got up and took my 3 nighttime meds, 2 sleeping pills, and a rather sedating neuromed, instead of my morning meds. I had an instant where I thought, maybe I could go to work? But then wisdom prevailed, and I called in sick. Yeah, that would be a long day. I wanted to refill my cup with more water, so I just poured my already half-filled cup out onto the table to make room for more water. Well, I mean, I guess you accomplished that at least. Alright, that's enough for these responses. Man, if somebody didn't know anything about humanity and only read this thread, they would think that we were just completely brain dead most of the time. But that does it for today on the internet, so thanks to everybody for watching, and I will talk to you tomorrow.